Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Fake Nerds Watch for Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Season 2, Episode 9, Subspace Rhapsody. I'm Brandon T. McClure, and I didn't almost say Star Trek Picard. And with me today is Ryan Eliopoulos.
We draw the line here.
And Sparkz Witty.
No, indeed, Brandon did not almost say any other Star Trek show but the one that we're actually in.
Yes, we are going to be talking about the 9th episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, titled Subspace Rhapsody. It's directed by Dermot Downes, who's his first directing credit on this show, but it's done many episodes for the CW, such as all the Arrowverse shows. Written by Dan Horgan and Bill Wolkoff, with music and lyrics by Kay Hanley and Tom Polche, who are two members of the band Letters to Cleo.
Oh, that's cute. Okay.
Yeah. All right, so let's get right into it. This was a musical romp. What do we think of this? Sparkz, you want to go first?
I guess so. Pretty good. Yeah. Had a fun time.
Right.
I think it's a really, really fun episode. I think if the only way I don't think you like this episode is if you don't like musicals. Because I think it's a really well-made, TV episode of a musical. And I think the only negative, because I think they brought it in most of the capacities. I think the only reason to really dislike it is I'm just not into musicals. But besides that, I think I had a really good time. It is, it feels something like musical tropey, but they're doing that on purpose. But recognizing the trope doesn't get away from the trope. But they are making fun of it in a way. So I still really enjoyed it. I had a really good time. I think it's a hoot and a holler.
This is my favorite episode of the season.
Yeah, I figured the way you talking about it.
I really didn't expect that. I having the first time I watched it and Spock starts singing in the beginning of the first act. Towards the end of the first act, I was skeptical. I was like, "Oh, this is weird. I don't know how to feel about this."
I will say, just because you're in that moment, I specifically when Spock started at the beginning, because it doesn't come up again, but for that particular part, for some reason, I was like, "Ooh, he's auto-tuned."
Oh yeah,
he's auto-tuned.
You can tell it's a studio and not them singing it naturally.
And I was like, "Ooh, is it gonna all be like this?" And it wasn't all like that. So
yeah, it was just such a. I knew this was a musical episode. I obviously knew this was coming. I was very excited for it, but coming out of starting it, I was like, oh, I don't know, maybe I'm not prepared for this cast to be singing and dancing for the next hour. But watching the whole episode, loving the whole episode, sitting with it for at the time of this recording a few weeks now, and having listened to the soundtrack a number of times, and I'm ashamed to say how many times, I really love it, and it is my favorite episode of the season. I really love this episode.
Yeah, I do have to applaud it for really going for it. I felt like it was the type of thing where when you're listening to the songs, I was able to rhyme the next verse, because they're pretty easy rhymes that they're going for, but none of it's bad. It's just I was actually more impressed with just the orchestra and the music itself more than the actual lyrics. And there was really, really nice orchestra stuff happening, and there was a variety of different types of songs. That was the thing I was most impressed with. And for being an hour-long show, I thought there was a variety of music, and they tried to do a bunch of different things. And for the most part, I thought it really worked pretty well. I think again, just to do a musical episode of Star Trek, that's already going so deep on the deep end of two things, Star Trek and musicals, where you really have to knock it out of the park. And I think it is absolutely more of a success than a failure. Because this could have been a truly total train wreck and the worst episode of Star Trek ever. And it wasn't. It feels like a good Star Trek episode that is a musical.
Yeah. I wanted to get a reference out of the way right up top, which is they mentioned many times in the episode, many times in the kind of behind the scenes stuff, that if you watch the Ready Room, then there's a making of this episode in that episode, and they talk about how Once More with Feeling, which is the Buffy the Vampire Slayer musical episode is a heavy influence on this episode, and they were always looking at like that's the bar. There is a reference to that episode when they're talking about turning into bunnies, which I thought was quite cute.
That is cute.
Especially in Benga's line, which is, "I would prefer not to be a bunny either."
Yeah. I'll go off what Ryan was saying, which is like I mostly like the episode, so I'm gonna get my like nitpick negatives out of the way.
Yeah.
Which is that like not all of the songs apply to what I'm about to say, but there's a chunk of songs in there that I felt like, and it's earlier in the episode. It's basically from Una and Kirk's song to Una and La'an's song. And that chunk of songs, which I think is those two, and then La'an's solo.
Yeah.
They are very similar in their structure, very similar in the way that they are set up, and like musicals tend to have songs that are similar without being reprisals, but they're not usually next to each other.
Yeah.
And I thought that particularly stood out as like all these songs are very much built the same.
Sure.
And that did bother me a little. We get to like Chapel's number, which has more variety. Spock has the Bad Boy song, and Uhura's solo is obviously a totally different beast from what they were doing with those three. But those ones in particular, I was like, these ones are too similar and too close to each other.
So I'm going to only disagree on this is coming from someone who is tone deaf. So I will only come to disagree on the La'an song, but I will agree when it I will say I will not. I'm not really sure why I fall on the agree or disagree scale. So I'll just pivot and just say I will speak on one of my things that I don't particularly like about this episode, and which again is an episode I love. I don't think either of Una's songs, as far as they are in the episode, are very good. I don't think they're choreographed well, and I don't really like. I don't know. Within the episode, listening to the soundtrack, very different because I like the songs specifically, and I'll kind of hone in on the one that she sings to La'an about keeping secrets. I find that song to be weirdly choreographed, and I don't understand why it's not a duet. It's just Una singing at La'an, and it's very weird. I listening to the song on its own, it's a sweet song. I like it. It's pleasant, but in the episode, it just doesn't feel right. No, either the choreography or the fact that La'an is just standing there watching Rebecca Romaine sing to her, it just doesn't feel right. And I kind of feel a similar way about the duet with her and Kirk. I don't quite think that song works very well either. I do see what you're saying.
Yeah, I think the songs in the back half are considerably stronger than the front half, and I think maybe even they knew that, but they didn't. I guess they didn't want to structure in a way where, like, because that would ruin the flow of the story they're telling. But I also feel like maybe that they had to have a certain amount of songs, and like, you got to fill it up. So like, not everyone's going to be great, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think more in particular with that, again, all of them are in such a similar vein, and I still include La'an solo. I think they're all kind of in a similar setup of what they're doing musically. And I would have, for La'an's arc, at least spread them out, even if you kept La'an's solo close to the initial Una and Kirk one, just because of what's going on and when it happens.
Yeah,
I would have pushed the Una and La'an song further in, so they're not so close to each other. It feels like you're tying up that feels like a thing that should have been stretched out just a little further.
Oh, sure, yeah.
As an arc in the episode. So like, it just made the songwriters for this are not doing a bad job by any means. I'm not saying that, but they do have like kind of just a vibe that when it's a solo song, they're all kind of the same, but varied just a little bit. But they're all kind of the same song. They'll all end kind of the same way. As far as like what line they choose to repeat, how the actor performs that repetition, it's all kind of that same
it gets more emotional at the end.
It's hitting of things, and like most musicals will go for a little bit more variety than that, and I wish there had been just a bit more in general in this episode.
Yeah,
I do wonder how much of that is the fact that these songwriters have never composed a musical before. Which is true. They are part of the band Letters to Cleo, which is true. They've done movie soundtracks before in some capacity, but they've never composed a musical before. This is the first time. So I do wonder how much of that shows with their songwriting or the placing of each song.
It's a different problem, but a similar setup of the problem that I have with Greatest Showman, which I like. I like Greatest Showman. Brandon and I have had this conversation off air before. My only problem with Greatest Showman is that if you really look at the songs, all of them are ballads. And there should be songs in there that are not ballads. You can't have all ballads all the time. And like they're good songs, but like it doesn't have a lot of up and down. It's all ups.
Yeah.
Because they all, even if they start not being a ballad, they turn into a ballad. And I'm like, that can't work. And there's a similar sense of like, I would say honestly, outside of obviously the group songs at the beginning and the end, don't count those for what I'm saying. But outside of Chapel's song, all of the songs are kind of structured in a similar way of like what verses they choose to repeat, what lines they choose to make stand out. It's all kind of a similar, like, it goes up here, it comes down here. It's all kind of following a similar pattern, even though like different performances are helping.
And the only time it does differ is with the Klingons, and I was waiting for it, and holy shit, that was one of the worst things I've seen in my entire life.
Oh, interesting. All right.
Yeah, I didn't like it.
We will get into that a little later because I want to hold off on that. But I did notice this most recent time that I watched the episode, because I've watched it about 3 times now, that I do kind of miss the fact that there's not many duets or many ensemble pieces. Most of them are solos. Most of the songs in the soundtrack are solos, and I would have liked to have seen more variety in the types of songs that were done.
I like Spock's song, his solo.
Yeah.
However, Uhura's right there, and I'm like, why is this not a duet?
Sure.
Like it was bothering me the whole time, and then he leaves and she stays and then has her solo, and I'm like, oh, that's why.
Yeah.
And
he used the same set.
And don't get me wrong, she's the best singer of the cast by far.
Yeah.
So giving her solo is important, but
she's the only one who's won a Grammy.
She's stellar.
Yeah.
Truly, like her and Chapel are, I think, the strongest of the cast members here.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
But her in particular, like obviously they played to her strengths with her solo, but like I get it. I get giving her, but it is like when she's there with Spock, I'm like, why are you not singing? Why is this not a duet? And that you're right, Brandon. Like that does come up a couple. I think there's just a structural issue of like, it's a good episode. I'm gonna get like all my little garbage shit out of the way about it. It's a good episode, but like it's not as well handled as a musical is. And I'll admit that part of it is hindered by the fact of something I love about it, which is that it's just happening to them and they're aware of it.
Yeah.
Which means like lights can't appear out of nowhere because that's not what's happening. You get what I mean? Like you can't have stage lighting that doesn't exist on the ship.
Right.
And like that hurts it visually a bit, to be honest. It does. They try and do some stuff, which I appreciate, specifically like Spock songs has like the lights in the engine room changing on tempo and things like that.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. But like you can't do stage lighting because it's happening to them on the ship in reality. So like lighting that doesn't exist can't appear the way it did in Once More with Feeling.
And I don't understand why it couldn't, because the world is changing to make it into a musical. So just have the world change it. Like it's not real.
There's an amount of
I can do a stage light.
There's an amount of, as a TV viewer audience, that you would accept it.
Yeah.
But the problem, I think, is because like in Once More with Feeling, which is a good comp, and it makes sense why they drove themselves next to it. In the Buffy episode, they are not fully aware of it, right? Like they're not directly engaged with the musical at all times. Like they know it's happening to them, but they don't really, like they kind of get transformed.
They're not
by
thinking
it.
about it all the time.
They get transformed by it.
Yeah.
The characters here are actively
fighting it.
Yeah. Constantly and wanting to hide their emotions, and you kind of can't do that and also have those characters, like if you do stage lighting, be like, where do those lights come from, and have to like scientifically look into it and all that kind of stuff, because you've made them too real and grounded in the context. And I really like it, because you almost never have a musical episode that does that, where this is forced upon them and they're actively trying to resist it. And it's one of my favorite things, is like La'an moving, like quick walking to her quarters so that she doesn't sing in front of other people, because she hears the music starting and like,
I love
trying to go.
That anytime like they're having a conversation and it's getting a little rifle, the music will start and one person will go like, oh no.
Yeah, right.
They'll look around because like, where's it coming from? That's
who got emotional.
Yeah, that's what I mentioned to you. Like what I love about this episode, that is all diegetic. Like this is all happening to them. It's not like they live in the world of a musical. Like it's happening to them. And you can fight it as hard as you can, but the more you fight, the more your emotions want to break out.
Right.
And that's really great. Specifically, like characters like Spock. I really like his bad boy songs.
Yes.
He might not be the best singer, but that's really fun to see him have like, oh, this is my bad boy episode. I'm like, bro, you're Spock. You ain't a bad boy. Like he's trying so hard to look cool, and I'm like, oh, this is juicy. This is really good.
Right.
Yeah.
He's feeling emotions in a big way for the first time and expressing them, and so they come out like very emo.
Absolutely.
No, and that's a lot of fun. But I do think it is like they are hindered by what I do think is a great concept.
Yes.
They are hindered by it in the fact that because they have grounded it so much in the world of Star Trek,
they put themselves,
they are limited by what they can visually do, because the characters would have to ask questions about it, because they are actively resisting the musical throughout the episode. And I do think that puts them in just a weird spot that's hard to work its way out of.
Yeah. There's a line that exemplifies what you're saying that I quite like, which is when they're all in the ready room and they're trying to figure out what just happened. Kirk has this moment. He's like, honestly, I thought you guys rehearsed it, and then I started doing it.
Yes.
And I just thought that was really funny, because it's just like, why is everybody singing? Oh, I'm singing now. What's going on?
Right. And like the way that it overtakes you. And I do think like part of what bothers me is that like there will be different places where they'll break those rules a little bit, right? The Klingon section in particular, they do get stage lighting, which makes no sense. And there's when we're getting towards the end, we get choreography, like a lot of it from the people in the background moving through as Uhura's spreading the message to the ship. And up to that point, I kind of accepted that like choreography was limited, because like, I don't know, like most of what it is about the singing and the music.
Yeah.
And that's really all that the fault is doing. But if you can do choreography, everyone should have had better choreography. Like the choreography in general, like just how it's filmed for television is not good. I'll say like there's a lot too much of like essentially the blocking for La'an, Uhura, and Spock solos
walking
are
around.
the same.
There's walk
to where
walk
we
to...
put camera, and don't look at camera, but look past camera. Now walk to other corner and think. And like they're all it's a little rote. And so when you don't have the advantages of stage lighting, and you don't have the advantages of the other visual things that they can toss on it, you have to at least make the visual movement of the actors in the space more engaging. La'an gets a little bit of a pass on her solo because of the flashback, not flashback, but the fake memories.
Oh, sure, yeah.
That she's experiencing in the montage of like the what if. And that helps. That honestly helps. It makes that one work and stand out, but especially the fact, like, and I love both the songs. The fact that Spock and Uhura's come back to back in the same location and they essentially do the same movements.
Yeah.
Not great. And I wish that had been.
It almost feels like a scheduling thing. Like shit, we got to use the same room. Oh no.
No, I'm sure it is. I'm sure Structure Change New Worlds has the benefit of being on a much more broad schedule than a normal network TV show. But there is still a scheduling issue where you are meant to wrap an episode as quickly as you can so you can move on to the next one. And the fact that this is what an old Star Trek show would be called a bottle episode. That most new Star Trek shows tend to be quote unquote bottle episodes. Because they build the ships as well. Are you being beamed away?
No, I think the fault's getting to us. Expect music any moment now.
And I think when you have these sets, you want to utilize these big grand sets for these new Star Trek shows, but you also need to be like, okay, well, next week's episode needs to film here quickly. So can we wrap this one up so we can get next week's episode to do the same thing? I'm sure maybe that's the case there, but I'm not sure.
You very well could be correct.
Oh,
And big, you have to find the ways to work around, especially like acclimating yourself to the visual medium that you've restricted yourself to.
Yeah.
You have eliminated a lot of other tools that musicals have to cover things. And so if you're doing that, then you have to use what you're left with to its best ability. And I just don't think there was enough choreo. Like, you've got the chapel song that looks really good, and then not a lot of other things look very good by comparison.
I think what they could have done is, like, I like the idea of, because they start doing choreography at the end. Like, why don't they do that from the beginning? Like, what if it's getting worse and worse, and by the time we get to the end, they are in full blown musical?
Well, they do it in chapel song too.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, like in the middle. But that's part of the problem, is that like that comes before Spock and Uhura's thing. Okay. And they have like limited stuff going on. It's just not, it's my only point being, like, really enjoy the episode. I thought it was a lot of fun. Really love all the characters and all that. And I'm going to get into a shit ton of positives I have about it in a moment. But my major sum up is just like, because they restricted themselves into this ground reality, which again, I think is very fun. It made it feel very fresh. I love the idea of these characters being afraid of expressing themselves through song and trying to escape it, I think is really good. That being said, I don't think that they compensated for the fact that they were restricting the reality down so much.
They put themselves kind of like in a box in a way.
To be as visually appealing. It makes sense to me that some things play better just listening to them than they do watching them, because sometimes they get frankly a little boring and stale because of how it's structured visually.
What I find so interesting about this discussion, and I've got you guys like fucking, like, you can't see, but this is a whole page just all shit I loved about this movie, about this episode, because I did love it. What I find so interesting about this discussion in particular is that we have effectively found on a Star Trek Fake Nerds Watch show my biggest weakness. I do not have as sophisticated of a taste in musicals as Sparkz does, for example. He's been in many, he's seen many. He knows them inside and out in a way that I do not. I have very I don't like using the word bad taste in musicals, but I have been known to to dislike my fair share, to like my fair share of bad musicals, such as the aforementioned Greatest Showman, which is a movie I deeply love.
It's not a bad musical. It's not a bad musical.
Many would disagree with that statement.
Sure,
but I quite like. Because my taste is so is so insignificant compared to Sparks's, for example, we've essentially found a great weakness that I will have in this discussion, which I find so fascinating.
It honestly, it has so much, frankly, and I don't want to call your taste insignificant. Like, you're open to things and less critical about things in a way that I'm just not about certain musical stuff. But specifically here, it's not really about the musical stuff as much as it is, like, again, because they remove so much of the musical reality.
It's the visual component.
It's about shot composition.
Yeah.
It's simply about knowing how to frame people and make it stay interesting. And like, anybody would tell you that if you are having two characters engaged in a 3-minute conversation, as Spock and Uhura are in the same location, and then one of them is going to leave and the other one is going to stay for another 3 minutes, you have to give them something visually more dynamic to do than what was previously done.
Yeah.
Regardless of if it's musical or not. And that just didn't happen here. This is just kind of a failure to utilize the medium of the framing of the camera to make up for these other things that they can't do because it's not on a stage.
Sure. But I want to, because as we've already mentioned, there's plenty of things to like in this episode. So I want to talk about the beginning, which, because before we get into the singing, there is what I'm so grateful, because we've been talking about it on the show for quite a while, how the bookend log entries have been wildly inconsistent this season. Thankfully, this season that is not the case, because we open and we close with Uhura's log entries, and I think the opening one is really cool. I really like seeing her doing the kind of old-fashioned communications thing, where we're seeing her kind of moving communications through it and taking all the things. Very busy, very hectic. I think it's a really cool little montage there of everybody on the ship trying to call her and be like, hey, anything from Dr. Corby, hey, anything from Captain Patel, sending it through, da 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 da. I just thought it was a really cool sequence to open the episode with.
Yeah, I agree with that. I thought that was really solid. I think Uhura's centralization works very well as this idea of we're all connected and we're all doing this kind of thing. Yeah. With probably the exception of hey, I'm going to actively make you confront Chapel so I can get this reading. Go, Spock, go. Oh, shit. Your heart got broken? I'm not going to sing about that. That's a little messed up. But otherwise, I really like Uhura's arc through the episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like both. For me, I really like both Uhura and La'an's arc in the episode. I think both of them have very strong arcs in the episode. The other thing that I do want to mention up top is in the very beginning of the episode, the reason why this happens is because they found a subspace fold in space, a very visual subspace fold that they theorize could send subspace communications much quicker than they can at this point of the quadrant, which would allow much quicker communication between ships.
Space internet,
pretty much. And so they theorize, well, if a normal talking message isn't getting through, let's send a song. And it's just ridiculous enough to work as they send it through, and a tear opens within the fabric of reality to allow them to start singing. A zipper.
Yeah.
I think that's quite fun.
No, it's a great setup, and to be honest with you, I was enjoying for like a good chunk of the episode where I was actively saying to Ryan, like, I really love that the stakes are we have to stop this or we'll be an eternal song forever. Yeah. And like, the whole universe will. And I'm like, man, what stakes? Like, it's not really that bad, but like, it's not ideal.
Yeah.
No.
And it's just something you want to avoid until it turns into, oh no, this works like kerosene over the universe. We can't blow it up. Oh no, the Klingons are going to blow it up. The universe will be destroyed. And I'm like, oh, okay, we got to the real stakes.
Yeah.
I really like how the stakes elevated, because especially my favorite, so Pike is kind of is my second MVP of the episode, because I think he in particular is a lot of fun to watch during these musical sequences, because he's so uncomfortable and he's so ready to be done with it, and I'm just so ready to be out of this. And he has the moment where he's like, why don't we blow it up?
Yeah.
And they're all like, yeah, okay, that could work. And he's like, really?
Yeah. He's very good in it as just wanting out as fast as possible.
Yes.
And like emotionally uncomfortable. I was honestly surprised. They do stuff obviously with him and Patel. But I was surprised it didn't go harder. I truly thought that like they were going to end up having to pull their duet from the bridge into a bigger thing, but it just gets hung up on, and I'm like, all right.
I was hoping for a little more as well.
I was, yeah. I thought we would have more big emotional catharsis. This was an excuse for it, even though I understand, like, clearly Anson Mount's not necessarily the strongest singer, which is fine. We can't all be perfect.
Yeah.
Almost perfect.
He's almost
very
perfect.
attractive. He can do whatever he wants otherwise.
And they still get closure at the end anyway, so like it's still nice.
No, yeah.
Since we're on Patel and Pike, I will say it is unfortunately another negative that I have. I think the conflict between the two of them is rather forced, and it retreads the plot of the Rigel 7 episode, and I just don't think that was necessary.
Yeah, the vacation thing, I'm like, this seems really this definitely seems like what can we artificially create drama here?
I wish it had been a little bit more of a very minor thing of just like neither of them are very like focused on it or upset. Just like I kind of feel like we could have a different location. Yeah, all right, I guess we can think about it. And like sincerely like execute in a way where like they clearly neither of them are they're just gonna keep negotiating on it. It's not a big deal.
Neither of them are good at this.
But when she makes the call it turns into like it's activating something even
Yeah.
worse to make melodrama out of them, which it never quite pulled that thread as hard as I thought it would.
Yeah.
Of like not just like making people express emotions, but amplifying them to a degree of like creating the musical melodrama. And I thought that would have been a better way to go about it, because it's like it is a silly thing. It's a silly thing they shouldn't be arguing about, but you could turn it into, through the musical vein, a big thing.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the episode, they're like, that really wasn't a big deal.
So we learned a vital piece of Captain Patel information in this episode. Her first name is Marie.
Marie.
We did not know that originally, and the end of the episode ends with them being like, "Oh, sorry, we got to postpone our vacation because something came up." And I'm like, "Oh man,
Oh
this
no.
doesn't sound well."
The Gorn.
The Gorn.
Oh no, Gorn.
But yes, we learned her first name, which is nice. It's always nice to learn of a female character's first name. Gives them a little bit more characterization than just there's that love interest that you have that we only know the last name of.
Yeah.
There's another plot line going through this, which is Chapel.
Okay, wait, well, hold up. I want to pause real quick before we go to Chapel.
Sorry, yeah.
I just want to talk a little bit more about the opening. I think that the way it builds out as a musical number affecting all of them is really well executed. This I am saying visually and lyrically, I think it's very well chosen, because we are moving again, because it's using more bodies, so it's visually engaging.
Yeah.
But like, you know, we're traveling from station to station, and it's like it's getting everybody, and you're watching Pike in the middle, like, what?
He has this moment when he says Lieutenant Ortega status report, and Ortega starts singing. He gets out of his chair and like backs away, and because he's so scared. He's like, "What?"
They're all sick. They're all sick. Yeah.
And then when Una is like, "Everything's fine," he's just like, "No."
Yeah, I also think Apologies was such a good chorus section going across.
Yeah.
Like thought that was a really excellent choice in Star Trek for lingo.
Although it has my least favorite musical line in this episode, which is, "Ortegas is at the helm, the pilot's seat is my realm."
Yeah, that one was definitely.
Yeah, that was not great.
Yeah,
and
that one felt like a sixth grader.
because part of the problem was like up to that point, especially in that song, everything had felt like people trying to talk still, but it was turning into song.
Yeah,
and like that turned into Ortegas wouldn't say that. No. Like that's not conversation.
Realm is a word I don't think she'd ever say in her life.
But it kind of goes to just, again, how this season clearly didn't have much for Ortegas to do other than she flies the ship.
Yeah,
she's the pilot.
Honestly, it should have been. They should have found a way for it to just be a reprisal of that.
My name is Ortegas and I fly the ship.
Yeah, give her a song.
It should have just been a repetition of that. That would have been funny.
Absolutely. There you go.
The other thing I'll touch on, I really, really like the a cappella Strange New Worlds opening.
Yeah.
Me too.
Oh yeah.
I really appreciate Strange New Worlds allowing to be silly just in general, but the fact that this season we had an animated opening and an a cappella opening, I think is really fun. It's a level of fun that we haven't seen Star Trek do before, and I just appreciate it like hell.
For sure.
Again, like they went the full mile. Like they didn't have to do that animated opening or the end. They didn't have to do the acapella. Like they did the little extra cherry on top, and it's like people care. That's nice.
Exactly. So
real quick. Sorry, one last thing, just about the beginning. Just from the jump, I loved Una's hair. This is a weird thing. I don't normally bring this up, but Una's hair is like a throwback to classic,
the ponytail,
like 50s, 60s musical era, and also kind of a throwback to the original Star Trek for her look. And I really like that. And I like that because of the vein of kind of like what is supposed to be the musical inspiration for a lot of this is that, you know, what they send into the slipstream is very that style. And I really like her hair matching I just like her hair matching the moment. I don't normally cite that kind of thing, but I thought it was a really great choice.
Yeah.
So in the beginning of the episode, we learned that Chapel is waiting for a correspondence from Dr. Corby, who we've name dropped before. in the episode where she and Spock kissed. Dr. Corby is for original series fans, they will know that history there.
You mean that future?
That future, yeah. I was surprised that this has happened so quickly. This is not an episode critique. This is a season critique.
Yes.
It is a shame that we are already done with the Chapel and Spock relationship.
100% agreed. I feel like we've kind of alluded to it in every episode since the kiss, where it's like Chapel and Spock were almost immediately on the rocks in the next episode, and we were like, whoa, what happened? Did we miss an episode as far as their relationship?
Yeah.
Like, we all kind of felt that way. Like, we didn't get, like, it's so, and it's fine, I guess, if the point is that, like, actually once they're together, they don't really work. I guess that's fine if that's the point. But I don't feel like that was given to us very well. It's so weird. It is so weird that thing that has been hanging over since, early in season 1 turned into the big kiss, and then their relationship taking a backseat to every story that's happened since then, even this one to an extent, to a degree where we don't actually watch anything developing between the two of them that's about them. There are small cues about how they interact with each other, but it's not about their relationship. It's not about what's going on with them. And it's so bizarre to have that happen and then just have it cut short here. I agree. This is a season problem. Like, it truly just feels like we're missing an episode somewhere in there that was about their relationship to some extent. Yeah. Like, about them having to count on each other for, I don't know. Like, it's bizarre as hell.
Because I talked at length during the season 1 discussions that we had on this channel about how I never wanted them to get together. I never thought it was a good idea. But as the season went along, I really started to see the vision there, as it were. I historically do not like Nurse Chapel in the original series. I think she is a horribly written character that is written to just be pining after Spock at every waking turn. And I think it's a terrible thing to give someone, especially the queen of Star Trek, Majel Barrett. Or Majel Roddenberry, and it really sucks that this. And what's so interesting is that there is even still like I see the idea of like, okay, we're given new that now Spock is kind of lover scorned, which is why he's which is why he's so against the advances that Chapel gives, but we went through it so quickly.
Yeah.
It doesn't come to fruition in the way that I think was intended.
Yeah, kind of to your point, I feel like I get it if like the logic is what this moment is this is why Chapel is the way she is for the rest of Star Trek, right? Pining after Spock, kind of wishing that she could go back and change this decision of pushing him away. Okay, I just don't think they gave the characters or the performers their due. It's not even about like the length of time as much as it is like the time we spent with them as an audience.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
That's exactly
like they needed more scenes in a previous episode of that.
I think the only time I've seen them together, they're playing chess, 3D chess or whatever.
Or he's talking to the Klingon guy about other things to distract him so that her trauma isn't triggered. Because again, like that episode is about so much else in that example, right? That like it can't be about Chapel and Spock, even though it's trying to give you like little kernels. It's not giving you the picture. And this audience for Strange New Worlds in particular, regardless of like their affiliation with previous Star Trek projects or anything like that, have been pulled in to be engaged with what is this relationship going to be, even if it's not going to last forever. Like what is this thing? Because clearly there was a chemistry and they were playing with it and the flirtation and all that, and it built up into something, and then it kind of just it's done. And that's super bizarre, just a super bizarre choice. And I do think like part of the point of it is supposed to be that like Chapel kind of gets into it and very quickly becomes like standoffish and pushing Spock away. And I'm like, you can have that be what's going on, but we need to address that like directly, not subtextually, but directly. That's what she's doing. And then ultimately pushes Spock away completely and then regrets that decision for the rest of her life. You can do that. That can be the story, but you got to do it.
So Spock, if they wanted this idea to be the reason why Spock, obviously this is a more emotional Spock, and when he was with Chapel in these scenes, there's been a few mentions of how he is experimenting more with emotions. There's, we talked about a little bit with the lower decks thing, that it's a little weird that we're framing it in the way they did it there, but there is a sense that Chapel is kind of allowing Spock to get more in touch with his human side and less with his Vulcan side. And so I can see where the idea is probably that Chapel distancing herself from him and kind of breaking up with him is the reason why he decided to go full into his Vulcan side and completely disconnect from his human side, which brings him nicely to the original series. But because we didn't spend any time as an audience with them in a relationship, that moment doesn't land very well. And that's a real shame, because I really thought that they were adding interesting layers to the Spock Chapel dynamic that strengthened the original series, and it's kind of a bummer that we kind of land a little flat on that.
It makes me wonder if, they're in the writer's room this entire season, and they're getting to the end of this season. They're like, all right, what are we going to do for the next season? And they're like, we have no room for romance. We set up a romance that we have literally no room for. Like, we're going to do a whole season of the Gorn. We got no room for this. They're like, we have to cut it short. That's what it kind of feels like. Like, they set up something and they're like, oh, we can't pay this off in any way, so we have to cut it off. And that sucks. That kind of just sucks.
Yeah, even then, like, you kind of, it's crazy. Like, if you'd asked me at the midpoint of the season, let's say, when the kiss happens, hey, by the end of the season, do you think La'an's affections for Kirk or Spock and Chapel getting together will have the better wrap up?
Yeah.
I would have said Spock and Chapel, and I would have been wrong as hell. Like, it's bizarre. It's just bizarre. But you know what? Maybe they are doing a good job, because like, I really love the actor, but I'm starting to hate Chapel, which I guess is what happens at the beginning of the original series. So I guess they're doing their job.
No, don't do it.
I love Jess Bush. I think she's wonderful. You brought up,
I think she crushes it, but she's being written shit at this point.
Yeah, you brought up Kirk. Should we move into Kirk?
I would love to. I love that story.
Same.
Talk about paying off in a very effective way, and making me like more. Something I definitely didn't care for that much earlier this season.
Yeah. I've been very critical of Paul Wesley's performance as Kirk, and I just want to point out there is a moment when they're in the transporter room and it's before the explosion, and he gives La'an a look, and it's kind of framed from La'an's perspective, so it's up at Kirk. And I looked at that face that Paul Wesley makes, and I was like, oh shit, that's Kirk. Like, I was just like, damn, there was a face that he made, and I was like, I just saw William Shatner for a minute.
You were the little boy and hugged it. Oh, there you are, Kirk.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, there you are, Peter.
Yeah.
100%. Like, I think that we went to the Jim Kirk well too frequently this season. He has three appearances and probably too many. Although I say that, and I'll discredit what I just said by saying, but I really like him in this episode. I just hope that we don't see him in the next season.
So that's the thing. Like, I think, like, to what you said, Sparkz, like, I absolutely adore the way that this played out. Because I expected it to go longer, and who knows, and like, they get together and break up and everything we speculated. But like, not only did they wrap it up cleanly, but they also tied it in directly into all the stuff we would talk about the future. Like, he's with Carol, his on again, off again girlfriend. He's with her at the moment, and she's pregnant with that kid who's in that David. Yeah. So I'm like, damn, this actually all makes sense. They don't, like, as much as I would like to have seen them get together and the drama and blah, blah, this actually like logically and sense for the canon and for this story right now totally makes sense. And I loved it. And Kirk, he's such a good dude. He says like, hey, you're still a badass though. You're still cool. I still have a drink with you. I'm just not going to bang you.
I really like the Kirk La'an subplot in this episode. Like I really like it. Like I there is a lot to love in the scene because it La'an, we've seen it. La'an is more open than she was to her crew, but there was still a wall there. There's still pain from what she can't say what happened. She can't talk to anybody about it. But so seeing Kirk brings up all these things. By the way, and I love how flustered she is when Kirk shows up at the transporter, which is great. She goes the wrong way, and she gets to have this moment where she's like, where she breaks the temporal prime directive, and even Kirk's like, oh, hold on, like you're about to break a pretty big rule here, and I just really think that the way that she is able to share her feelings with this person in a way that gives her the catharsis and really just brings down that wall once and for all is really well done.
Yeah. I want to respond to like just the appearances of Kirk, and I think there would have been a simple solution to really make it feel like he wasn't too overburdened into the season, because
Mhm.
I think the alternate timeline stuff is fine.
Yeah, sure.
So getting real Kirk, I really like the other episode with him. I think all it would have taken is for him to be on the ship for the same reason in that episode that he is in this episode, and for them to be right next to each other.
Mm.
So he's there to shadow Una and like learn to be a better number one.
Yeah.
That would have been fine. He could have been there one episode to the next, and that like those 2 episodes were during the stint where he was learning to be a good number one. And, like, I'd be like, great. And I think the only reason that it isn't like that is because of Uhura. Because it's a Uhura-centric episode for that one, and it ends up being pretty Uhura-centered by the end of this one as well. And I think that's the only reason that it doesn't happen, which is a big, big bummer, because I think it would have, honestly, nobody, I think, would have felt like Kirk was on the ship too much if he hadn't, like, been there, left, and came back.
Yeah.
I think if he'd been there for the same reason, 2 episodes next to each other, everyone would have been like, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're right. And that kind of goes to another thing that I've struggled this season is I don't think it's as well balanced as the first season. I we talked about it just Under the Cloak of War, which is the last week's episode, was an episode about Mbenga committing a war crime. In this episode, he's skipping out of sickbay singing. So like I get that we can have these different tones in Star Trek, and it's fine. But it's weird how we've paced this season to have episodes just kind of radically different than each other, just not placed well together.
Yeah,
I don't think anyway.
It's I don't remember the exact line, but like there's like a reference to like something that happened in the last episode. I'm like, oh yeah, the murder, right? The murder, and it's just like it's no big deal. And I'm like, yeah, it's just that is really funny, just because again, last episode was the really dramatic one, and this one's the musical. It's just you can't avoid that. It's just it is what it is.
You can structure your season better by that's how you avoid it.
The murder sandwich of animated musical. Yeah.
I and like and then figure out your Spock and Chapel shit amongst all of that. Like it is purely just like there is just a structural issue, I think, to where some of these things were placed for sure. But definitely as far as like Kirk coming on the ship, when I look at the episodes as the 2 episodes, I love both of them. I love both of his involvement in it, and I'm like 100%. I'm here for it. I'm here for the first time hanging out with Spock and Uhura. I'm here for the La'an stuff, and I like how it's done in that episode and how it continues into this episode. Essentially, I would have just put them right next to each other. Would have just had them doing all the Shadow of Una stuff.
I got a question, and this is what I'm about to say. I swear it's not negative, but like. The way I'm going to phrase it will sound negative.
Sure.
2 of this season's episodes were technically like gimmick episodes, the musical and the animated episode. I don't mean that in a negative way, but they are not a core. We're not following our core crew. Well, this one is, but we're doing different things. Like, do you think if those 2 quote unquote gimmick episodes were just regular episodes and we could dive into the plot and the character stuff more, that would have helped? Because a lot of that animated episode was a lot of the Boimler and Mariner stuff. So like I'm just wondering, like, that was a little more real estate to work with some of that stuff, even though that stuff is happening within those episodes. I'm just wondering if like, oh, we have to clear room for the fun stuff we're doing. We can't focus so much on the hardcore story stuff that we planned. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know if it's a yes or a no.
May I first, Brandon?
Sure, go ahead.
It's a pop bubble.
I don't think it applies to this episode.
Yeah.
And I don't think it applies to this episode because this episode's all about making people express the emotional stuff. Exactly what we're talking about with Lon and Kirk. This was a really good way to make her have to directly confront that when she probably wouldn't have otherwise.
True.
And so I think this one works.
But also in the negative of the Spock stuff, it feels like they have to address that here.
Yes, absolutely. But I don't think the problem of that is because it's a musical episode. I think the problem is because the stuff that got us here wasn't done well.
Okay.
So the Spock and Chapel stuff here isn't really my problem. My problem is that the things that deteriorated the relationship to the point of this episode, we didn't get to spend time with. We didn't engage with.
Gotcha.
So I don't think this episode is the problem.
Okay.
But and I do think there's room to have your fun crossover episode.
Absolutely.
I maybe would have put it a different episode in the season. I think the one that really is like, like we've talked about other things where like the Ortegas episode that really gets robbed from her and given to like a lot of Pike stuff, which now that I'm thinking about is kind of like one of Pike's only major episodes that's focused on him. Yeah. Unfortunately. That could have like had more other of the things we've talked about that before. Yeah. So there's some things where it's like, I don't know, did we need this? We didn't need the flashbacks with Chapel and Benga in the last one as much as they were there. That's true. So that we could focus on the character arcs. And you could have had more Spock and Chapel scenes there. Spock trying to be a good boyfriend and Chapel shutting him down, that kind of thing. Like more actively engaged with that. So I think there's room in those other episodes. And the problem is just like story structure and like they're tracking these arcs, but they're tracking these arcs in a weird way. Yeah. And I don't think that they came to the ground on them enough. And I don't think it necessarily has to do with like the jumbling of the fun or the dark episodes or that kind of thing. It's more just like, I think they took their focus off certain balls at the wrong time.
That makes sense. Before your response, but I was just thinking of like comic book arcs, and then when an event happens, and you have to have like the filler like issue. Like number 7 is a Sins of Sinister tie-in that's like completely breaks it up, and like that's the musical episode, and like it can still tie in, but it's a separate thing. And I was just wondering, do you think that might have impacted it? But I think you said perfectly. Other story-driven episodes have focused on the wrong stories, so I think that's my
well, and also to that point, I will say that I do think the Lower Decks episode, which is our first one after the Spock and Chapel kiss.
Yes.
That one should have had a little bit more of Spock and Chapel in it.
Yes.
It engages with it, but it engages with it from a third person perspective where, again, we are not getting a lot of scenes that are them together. We are getting scenes of them engaging with Spock being different because of being with Chapel and Chapel being different because of being with Spock, but not by them being together. And that's the episode where, honestly, we should have had more of that and them looking at that and being like, this is weird because we know how this goes. Sure. And that would be the one where I'm like, yeah, you got to factor in more of that idea because that's where you just left our audience.
So the musical episode came about because the Christina Chong, who started on Broadway and came to television to kind of kickstart her career as a leading lady and not necessarily background actor. And she's putting out an album currently. And because she wants to get back onto the stage, but as a leading lady and not as a background actor, she was, and Melissa Navia, who came from musicals in high school. She did musicals in high school. Celia Rose Gooding won a Grammy from her Broadway appearances. And Rebecca Romaine is a trained singer as well. Although she hasn't done anything with it professionally. They all were begging Akiva Goldsman and Henry Alonso to do a musical episode for Star Trek. They kept wondering, like, is this possible? Can we do a musical episode? And little did they know, apparently, that the two of them had been talking about doing a musical episode. If I were them, I do feel like the fact that having the Lower Decks crossover and this episode, and I won't use the word gimmick. I do agree that they probably are, especially the Lower Decks one.
That's why I didn't want to. That's why I like. It's not negative. I didn't know the other word to use.
I understand. I probably wouldn't have had the two of them in the same season.
Yeah.
I think once you had one, you should have moved the other. And if Paramount was like really wanting to do a Lower Decks crossover, then you put that this season and you push the musical episode to the next season. There's a lot of this season that feels like we're not sure if we're getting a third season, so we're going to do this. And in fairness, they didn't, because they were filming this season as season 1 was airing. So they were not able to gauge audience interest, which is why Melissa Navia got the short end of the stick once again, because they were not able to gauge audience interest by the time the first season was airing, because normal TV seasons, like you don't go back to the drawing board until the season is almost halfway done airing. That's when you break the next season. So the streaming shows don't have that benefit, and I think it suffers with Star Trek specifically because Star Trek historically has succeeded in that respect.
Yeah,
I would if I were them, if I were to restructure the season, I would have done the Lower Decks episode first, the first episode of the season. Oh no, you can't do that because you need the court. You need the courtroom. Okay, after the court stuff, probably then. And then I would have done this in the next season.
Yeah,
and had something here that was just focused on Chapel and Spock. If you were going to put them together this season, and that have them be the focus of that episode, the two of them relationship be the focus of the episode.
So I just not, we're dealing in hypotheticals at this point,
Yeah.
but like, I agree. I think that like with Spock and Chapel stuff, if you put a musical episode next season and their relationship deteriorated at this episode, but it was about that, and you're done.
they focused on it. Yeah.
Then when you get to the musical episode, they can still express emotions about the fact that they broke up, and like that whole thing can happen.
They're sad about
that.
it.
That can be a whole thing. My counterpoint to it is, if you are doing the Lon and Kirk story here, do you think that thread works to finish in a next season, or do you feel like that would feel tacked on?
Well, see, we're on episode 9. If this happened in episode 1, it's like only 1-2 more episodes. Like I wouldn't feel it was that long prolonged, in my opinion. If this was something they stretched out,
right. But I don't think it's not necessarily something I'd be waiting for. But I wonder if by the time, because it's a whole season later, by the time you get to that season, do you feel like, oh, did we need to do that? Especially if you've had Kirk appearances otherwise.
Sure.
And this is like shoehorning it in. It doesn't matter. It's not what happened. I'm just merely like playing devil's advocate on the part that worked against the part that didn't.
In my perfect world, I will say in my perfect world, you don't have Kirk show up in this season, and you don't have this plot thread wrap up until the next season.
So you do have Kirk show up, but only the alternate Kirk?
Yes.
And then you don't see real Kirk until next season?
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, yeah, you could go about it that way. I think part of it is that La'an had a good arc throughout this season with it, right? That's about her being more expressive and everything. And part of it comes from having to engage with the real Kirk.
Yeah.
Like they do tie it in that way. I guess you can say there's another way, like obviously they could write to go about it, but it really worked in this context.
It did.
This is all hypothetical, but like I would overall probably agree that you could stretch these two out. But I also understand like kind of just going for it. Especially in the context of not knowing where you're going to get to go next necessarily.
So the whole thing with so as Ryan said, there's a nice Easter egg to Kirk's to the resolution between Kirk and La'an, that he does say he is currently with Carol and Carol is pregnant with David, both characters we meet in Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan. I think that's really great because I didn't see that coming.
Yeah,
I knew probably around this time he had probably met Carol Marcus. I didn't think that was going to be how they resolve, and I think that's a really good that's a really good explanation of using canon to further this story. I just thought it was really smart in a way that I didn't expect it to be smart. It doesn't feel like a tacked on Easter egg. It feels like a genuine moment. And it's so nice to see them do something like that.
Yeah, and I love that it's like, so I have this on again, off again girlfriend, but she's right now very much on again because I knocked her up. And I'm like, at least stay with her, Kirk. That's a good man right there. Until you don't. I love it. I think it's great.
Well, Carol tells him to leave.
Oh, Carol tells him. Well, there you go. He tried then. Okay.
Yeah, he doesn't break up with her. Carol says, "You don't want to be with me, so go away."
Well, she's probably right.
Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, great movie. Anyway, let's see where else I want to go with this. Sparkz, you got anything?
I think Paul Wesley's so cool.
Oh, there's a Kirk Brothers scene.
Mm-hmm.
I'm mad there's not a Kirk Brothers song.
I'd love a Kirk Brothers song.
See, I kind of wanted the kind of comedic, like almost the "I can do anything, you can do better" kind of vibe song for the two of them. And I honestly thought we were gonna get it. And then at a certain point, I was like, Oh, we're not gonna get that.
No.
Yeah.
Bummer.
I really love the Kirk brothers. I think Paul Wesley and I don't know the actor who plays Sam is. What's his name? I really like them, two of them together. I think they have really good chemistry as like this kind of sibling chemistry. And I really like when they're on the transporter pad, and she says, and he's like, she told me you asked for me. She said you missed me. That kind of like lording it over Jim. I
Sure.
thought this was really cute. Sam, by the way, is my MVP of this episode. I love him in this episode because of just what'd you say?
We're trying to read how to say the actor that plays Sam's name. It's Dan Genot, I think.
He's French. Looks like a Frenchie.
Oh.
So it's definitely a French last name.
Dan Genot.
Zara was watching a Hallmark movie the other day, and I saw I saw this cop, and I was like, oh, hi, Sam Kirk. He doesn't have the mustache. I was like, oh shit.
Sure.
Gotta make those. They gotta make those rent payments.
Anyway, so he I think is really fun in this episode if you're watching him, especially the Klingons song, because he's into it. He's like grooving with all the songs that are happening around him. He's having a good time. He's like, this is fun, guys. Let's do this.
Yeah. I honestly think there probably would have been one, but I get the feeling like Sam that actor actually cannot sing, like can't do it because there's
auto-tune can't even say
there's one bit in particular when they're doing like the chorus number at the end where like they focus on Sam and Sam is saying something and like it's partially the editing thing, like Sam's lip sync is off and like you don't hear a voice that sounds like Sam in that chorus at all. Like it's not prominent, it's not featured, which like if you're putting a focus on him, like for that one line, you feel like his voice would stand out. No, I don't think he can sing, unfortunately.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay, no shame, I can't sing.
No, I can't either. Let's see. I really appreciate whenever they get the Kirk brothers together. You know what? I want to ask, unless Sparkz, you have a place to go. I want to talk about something.
I did just real quick, like we kind of glossed over it a little bit because we were talking about like the problems with it, and there are a lot. But like Una's song to La'an, not a huge fan of the song. Don't like the choreography. Don't think the zero gravity is weird. Putting that aside, the character beat of I'm learning by virtue of the things that I've gone through from the previous season to this one to be more open. And part of my mistake was keeping myself shut in. I don't want to see you do that. Absolutely. I don't want to see you repeat my mistakes.
That was lovely.
And I think as the connection of those two characters in particular and the arc that Una has been on and now the arc that La'an is on, that was a really smart character beat to do. Don't love the song, but that was a very good character beat for Una.
Yeah, I agree. I think. Oh, I did write this down. I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say it's just a quick thing before I get into something else. They need a new quarters set. Not like to redo the quarter set that they have, but like they clearly just use just the one and they redress it for whatever they need. And it's so obvious. It's becoming so obvious now that I'm like, just make a second one. Just make a second one that's like inside the ship because they keep using the same one, and you can tell because the windows, so the windows on the top of the saucer section curve down, and so whenever they use a quarter, the one quarter set is the curved down. You can actually see it in the picture here, the picture that's on our background. You always see the curved down windows, and I was looking at and I always notice them every single time we're in that set, and I'm like, not every one of these quarters and fighting gyms and cadet quarters or whatever are in the same section of the hull. Can we make a second one, please, so that we can have some variety?
Are we sure? It's a big ship.
It's impossible. It's not that big. The Enterprise only has 200 people in it.
It's a big ship.
It's something that I'm just noticing. I noticed it last week and I forgot to bring it up, but it's just something that I'm like, can we get the budget for a second quarter set, please? Anyway,
continue.
General Garcon is the Klingon captain of the Katinga class battle cruiser that shows up at the end of this episode. Welcome back to the franchise, Bruce Horak. The actor who played Hemmer is playing General Gorkon, and I think that's awesome.
That's cool.
Gorkon. Gorkon is different. Is a different character. You guys didn't like the
I didn't say. I spoke for myself. I didn't hear what he said.
I mean,
K-pop scene.
You agree with me?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, it's. Oh, was it K-pop? Is that what they were doing?
No, it's Klingon pop, K-pop.
Oh sure,
Okay.
I get it.
that's a bad joke.
Yeah, it's whatever they were trying to do. For me, it brought the show to a halt, and I was like, because I knew the Klingons were coming, and I knew it was going to be something silly, but I don't know if they were trying to do hip hop or K-pop or something, but it felt like 60-year-old white people wrote that scene, and I'm just like, I don't know. I'm glad it lasted 5 seconds, because otherwise, if it was like 5 minutes, I would have changed my mind.
My problem is that like it felt like going for like the lowest hanging fruit.
Yes.
Of like, what's the stupidest looking thing we can make Klingons do, and like going for that genre. And what bothers me about it is more that everyone else up to that point was kind of in the same like vein of what style of musical they're in. And like,
Yes.
It's okay if you're going to change it for the Klingons, but I didn't feel like it was changed with purpose. I feel like it was just changed to be
shocking,
to be a gag,
Yeah.
a goof. And I might not have minded it as much if it wasn't like interrupting a different musical number completely. Yeah. And I was like, this doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to me to listen to or to watch. And if I was going to change the genre from the very like classical musical setting and style that it's doing, Americanized musical style, for the Klingons, I would have done something more sincere that is representational of like, if they sang, what would they say?
Like opera.
I would have done opera.
Yeah.
You were in the same place.
Yes.
I would have done opera. I would have had them do opera. I would have gone that way. I think that would have translated better.
All those Fathom events we go to the movies and we see trailers for.
Klingons.
That's what I expected.
Klingons are high, like dramatic
Shakespearean.
and Shakespearean.
Klingons are famous. Klingons are famous for their operas.
So I would have them be operatic. I think that would have made a ton of sense. And I think it would have flowed better if it's being an interruption. I think it would have worked better tonally to move from classical to opera and back to classical rather than classical to a riff on K-pop at best. To something that looks like it's trying to be a TikTok and then back to classical.
I do not disagree with that, with anything you said. I like it. I had a good time. I had fun with it. Is all I'll really say. I will, however, say the director of this episode agrees with you 100%. Because he fought against the inclusion of that sequence.
Sure, that's a good instinct, bud.
And he thought it ruined the pacing. He thought it was dumb. He thought it wasn't going to work. And he managed to get it down. According to him, I don't necessarily believe this. According to him, it was meant to be a little longer. He didn't say by how much. He did have the final edit, but he had to keep it. The producers kind of trumped him on that one. And I found that really funny. Now, I also expected a Klingon opera sequence. I find it funny. I'm really into it. The explanation for it from someone, I don't remember who exactly, is that it's supposed to be, and I don't agree with this explanation, by the way. I'm just kind of saying what they said. Is that it's supposed to be still within the same vein. Would it be Klingon opera? Because that's not what the musical reality is. It's not an opera reality, it's a musical reality. But I don't agree with that, because if that were the case, then it wouldn't change genre into a kind of a hip-hop sequence.
Right, exactly. Like, if it's not going to be exactly the same as what they're doing, Americanized classical musical, which the thing is that, like, it makes sense for them to do that because that's like the vein of what they admire, right? It's the vein of the thing that they put into the fold. If the Klingons came back with opera, it's close enough to classical musicalization that, like, it makes sense. And the fact that you told me that Klingons are famous for their operas, which is not something I knew when I was thinking this should have been operatic, is so goddamn obvious that it's like, that's not low-hanging fruit. That feels more like an Easter egg. What they did, I saw before I saw the musical episode. It's the only thing I saw out of the musical episode was this Klingon sequence. And I saw people being like, bro, what the fuck is this? And like, to be honest with you, as a group of producers who want people to be on board with the Star Trek stuff they're producing, this is definitely one of those things that should send up a red flag of like, Star Trek fans aren't going to like this. And I agree with them. On this one, I agree with them. Like, classic Star Trek fans, a lot of them who have not gone on board with a lot of the choices you've made, and I don't agree that they should feel that way. This one, I'll give them. You've taken them and you've like reduced, and I think it's even worse that it follows the war criminal episode about Klingons. The fact that this is the next thing we do.
Klingons do not look good in anyone's eyes ever again.
I'm like, this is bad. This is not a good choice. This is not a good direction to get people who are like the people who have been holding out on Star Trek. This is not how you get them to come on board.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't, like I said, I don't disagree with anyone who dislikes the sequence. I quite liked it. It's short enough to where I thought it was funny, especially Pike's response to it, just kind of looking back and going like, what the fuck was that? I think is quite fun.
And again, I just want to highlight again, because we're a little ways away from it, but it's the same argument, which is that like they get stage lighting when no one else does. And I don't like that either. Like, visually, they break from the consistency of what the rest of the episode has been doing. So it's not just a change in genre, it's also a change in how the rules of reality have applied to everyone else. So like, it all just like doesn't work for me. There's just no structure about it that lands.
I forgot to actually mention something about Chapel's song, which I quite like. I really like Chapel's song. I really like the Chapel and Spock song, real quickly before I get too far into this, are the same song, essentially. They have the same beat to them, which is the same kind of lyrical melody, I think, maybe. I don't know anything about anything. But like the way it kind of accentuates the mindset that the two of them are in regards to their relationship, because they're singing different sides of the same song. I just thought that was clever and well done. But Sam Kirk is celebrating with Chapel and Ortega's in the mess hall, and I looked at that and I said to myself, Sam is Chapel's friend? When has that ever been established?
Sam has friends.
Sam has friends? The dude who's eating in his xenoanthropology lab has friends? Good for you, dude.
He goes to the nurse every once in a while, I'm sure.
There's a fun Star Trek thing that I flipped out at, which is a deflector dish beam. Haven't seen one of those in quite a while. Made me very excited. Classic Star Trek trope where they are like, let's route this energy through the deflector dish, and then shoots a beam at whatever they're trying to do. We get that here with an old-fashioned TOS deflector dish. Mwah, loved it. Chef's kiss. 10 out of 10. Love to see it.
Sure.
Hey man, I'm gonna be a Star Trek nerd for a minute.
Yeah,
whenever it
totally
suits me.
allowed. I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's the scene where they're trying to zip
No.
up.
I know what it is. I have no idea of like the point of reference for it.
Oh, Carol Kane doesn't get a lot to do in this episode again. Kind of a bummer.
She is the person who gives the idea for music, which I really like. The way that she says it's basic harmonics.
It's her fault.
I also expected her to be, because I won't say she's an excellent singer, but she can sing like really well.
Yeah.
She can character sing essentially. It's bizarre, frankly, with Carol Kane's background, to have not had her more involved in a musical number. Yeah, I'm a little weirded out by that. Oh well.
I think it's interesting that I'm a little bummed about. Maybe we should wait for the next week to talk about this, but I'm a little bummed about the fact that we really didn't get a lot of Pelia in this season. Like, not really. We had the one episode that was, I think, her subplot. She was part of the subplot, but other than that, it was the other Uhura episode. Outside of that, we didn't really get much with her. I felt like at this point I knew more about Hemmer than I did about Pelia, and I wish I just knew more about Pelia.
I hope that part of that is because they're going to keep her on for season 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just
I think so.
That's kind of where I'm sitting with it, is that I hope that that's a part of it, because she has very much been there mostly to serve the stories of others.
Mhm.
And I think if she's around for another season, we'll get a story about her.
Man, yeah, I've got a couple more that I want to talk about, which is one bit that I really like, and this is going to be something that I'm sure goes into what Sparks Ryan's major criticism of this episode is, which is the kind of the rules of the musical reality don't really apply at certain points, especially towards the end. But I saw dancing starships, and that made me very happy. There's a sequence towards the end where the starships are all spinning together, and I was like, hell yeah, man, let's do it.
Actually, I think that's excellent.
Yeah.
I have zero problem with that. That is my point with what I was saying in relation to that earlier, is that if you can do that kind of choreography, if that's part of the reality, do more of it earlier. And like I said, like Chapel's song is kind of in the middle of this episode, or roughly. And that has established choreography. If that has it, then other places should have it too. There just should have been more well-structured blocking and choreography throughout the entire episode. I felt that is the bare minimum of what you can do if you can't do like special lighting and all these other kinds of tricks that you're going to do, then you have to have that. And I honestly love the ships doing that. I think it's great. I wish there were more things visually doing things like that in tone with the music.
I'm gonna shotgun some notes about the final number because I brought that up real quickly. Which is, it starts with Pike introducing Uhura to the whole ship's complement by saying the voice of the Enterprise. Really think that's sweet. I do really like the number. I really like the dancing starships. I really love the line when Pike just stands up triumphantly in his chair and he says, the Enterprise is electrified. I'm so proud to be your captain. And I'm just like, hey, Daddy's proud of me. I'm really excited to hear that. And Manga skipping out. It's a little weird. I get because he just committed a war crime last episode, but him skipping out of sick bay with Chapel is really sweet and really fun. I really liked it.
He doesn't feel bad about it.
I have to like in my head contextualize that like it's been like a month.
You have to yeah. Stop the next day.
And then at the end when they destroy the subspace fold because they reach their, it's so ridiculous. I love it because they reach their crescendo moment, that the right frequency that breaks the subspace fold. They play the original Alex Courage Star Trek theme from the 1960s show, and I thought that was really sweet.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think they came up with a really cute way of having to push a grand finale out.
Yeah.
I think the logic of how they get there with all their like Star Trekism and space stuff, and like this is all make believe, but also here's a kind of like scientific, in Star Trek context, logical way of like why all this has to come about this particular way, how we stop this kind of thing. I thought that was very well done, well executed, well thought out. I really like Uhura being the one to discover it. I can't stress enough. I think she's the most killer voice on the show. She's just crushing it.
And she has her arc is really nice because like she is the communications lady, but like, oh, nobody sees me. They just, like I'm just a telephone, but like, no, people, you are the Enterprise, girl. Like you are maybe the most important person on the ship. Like communication is so important to this episode, but also to Uhura, and that's really cool that it all seamlessly blends together. It's great.
Yeah, I really like her song. I think it's really beautiful. I'm sure you guys caught this, but Spock's song, his solo is a calculus joke. Solve for X. He solved for Y. I thought that was cute.
I'm the X. Yeah.
Of course he would sing about calculus.
Such a good bad boy song.
Such a good bad boy song.
I was waiting for him to put a leather jacket on somewhere, but
okay. So like part of my thing with it is like I really like them trying to kind of resist what the musical is doing to them. But once you introduce like I can't believe that there isn't a gag. And like Una and Kirk is kind of where I expected it when it first comes up and they start doing the dance stuff down the hall, that there isn't kind of like that beat where like the arm goes up and they didn't mean to do that, just like they don't mean to sing. And they're like, kind of looking at their body like, why is this happening to us? There's a comp I'm trying to think of doing exactly that thing, and I can't.
Beetlejuice.
I think it is Beetlejuice.
Yeah, it's because they're all dancing at the table.
Exactly.
And they're all
it is Beetlejuice.
Dancing.
It is Beetlejuice. It's exactly Beetlejuice. It's the same
same visual
way of how they do that thing.
Their body's out of control.
And their voices.
Yeah.
And I wish that same kind of visual language came up a little bit more in the choreography, again, with more choreography of them kind of doing that thing, because then I think you could have leaned more into the physicality of musical, and you could have had Spock do part of the fun of it is like you can watch Ethan Peck as Spock do visual motions he would never do in any other context as Spock, like where he literally like grabs onto the side of the engine pillar as he sings, and he's doing like that. He does this. Oh yeah, exactly. Like there should have been more of that choreography. I wish they'd gone just a little harder on that musical melodrama, let the emotions swing them just out a little bit wider.
I wish we saw, because there's a line, there's reports of singing breaking out all throughout the ship. I wish we got to see some other people, but not like have their number, like see their numbers, but like there's a bit in Once More Feeling to kind of, because they made the connection, I will make the connection when I think it's Buffy, she's walking along the street and we hear someone singing about getting a parking ticket, if I recall correctly. And I wish we cut to see kind of more of like other members of the crew breaking out into song in the background, not being the focus, but like knowing that this is happening on a consistent basis throughout everyone on the ship.
They get a message from April, and I was ready for them to cut to April singing their message. And I'm like, oh no, I want to see Commander April sing.
They say that he's got a beautiful baritone, but we don't get to see it.
I was like, oh, that would have been a great Family Guy style cut.
Also, it's really nice that April has forgiven them off screen.
For what, the murder?
No, for the court martial.
Oh yeah. Hey, Enterprise, like, you know, what's a week for the Enterprise?
I'll be honest, like the more we've talked about it, I'm like, I kind of wish they just expanded this into like an hour and a half.
It's close. It's close to an hour and a half already.
It's an hour. It's an hour long. It's an hour
67?
Nope, it's an hour 02 on my clock.
But I'm like, you add that 30 minutes, you get your Kirk Brothers song. You can have the baritone moment. You can have like a little bit more Chapel Spockism, where they actually have like a love song before the break apart song.
Yeah, I think what they're also like, it's not really a problem, but like musicals are like full length movies and full length plays. Like they are like hour and a half, 2 hour, 3 hour long, right? So like
it's tough to do a musical TV show.
Yeah, so like this feels like Act 1. Like it would have been nice to have, again, because this is the longest episode.
It's tough to do a musical episode of a TV show.
There you go.
It's not tough to do a musical TV show.
Yeah, Gallivant on Tuesdays on Fox.
Crazy Ex-Girlfriend.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend.
But
see, Brandon, look right at Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Thank you. That is a perfect comp of what I'm talking about. Yes, obviously they use like scene lighting and everything, but like even when they're doing their more contained stuff, they still have like a good structure of like framing and choreography. That's what this episode needed a little bit more. A little bit more of the Crazy Ex-Girlfriend when it's not a fantasy.
All right. I think
I have one more
note. My notes. Go ahead.
I have one more. I just think it's super cute at the end of the episode when Uhura has it stuck in her head and everyone like slowly is like, oh God,
no.
Did we not do it? And I kind of wish it had ended on like her not even clarifying, but she's just kind of like doesn't even turn to them. She's just kind of still ambiguous, and it's ambiguous. Like, is it musical forever?
It's obviously not. It's the Inception ending. Cut the black with her still humming.
Yeah,
that'd be funny. I ultimately I know I've look, I've said negatives here, I've said positives here, but I had a blast with this episode. I love the music. I love listening to the soundtrack. I'm very happy with this episode overall. For me, this is my favorite episode of the season. I don't think it quite hits my favorite episode of the show. I think that is still a Quality of Mercy, but it's quite up there. I really liked this episode.
I think it's really good. I think right now, if I were to try and put it somewhere, it's probably my second of the season, second or third. My first is definitely the episode 2, the Una episode, the Una Court episode. Nothing this season has really beat that for me.
Yeah.
I think that was so. I think that, like, weirdly, because we were nervous about that not having a lot of impact, like, weirdly,
it had the most impact.
I think that has been one of the most, like, strong and emotional episodes we've had in Strange New Worlds.
Yep.
And it really has continued to resonate with me ever since. And I'm really glad that I felt it resonate through all the characters and how they expressed feelings for each other since that moment.
100%.
So yeah, that one's sitting pretty high up for this season, having not seen the finale.
All right. Well, speaking of the finale, next time you'll see us will be for the final episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2, Hegemony.
Where we'll be asking once again, Kirk, what are you doing on this ship?
Kirk, you got a whole show.
Thankfully, Kirk is not in that episode.
Look, I gotta tell you, Brandon, I understand not wanting it to be too much about Kirk. I'm really liking what Paul Wesley is doing.
Yeah.
It's a little hard for me to not want him to stick around.
Did I tell you? Oh, maybe I should wait till next week.
Wait till next week.
You know what I want? Oh, sorry. You know what I want? I want a mission where like his ship's crew and our main ship's crew, a portion of them are both like stranded on.
So it's just the Enterprise.
No.
Okay,
like a portion of them. It could be like different people, and Kirk usually doesn't.
Oh, okay.
Like, but like have a portion and a portion stranded on a planet.
Sure.
And that's how you involve Kirk. So he's not like visiting the ship or that kind of thing, but it's like, oh, here's another reason of how we got Kirk involved. And I'm like,
because Kirk knows like half those people, so it have to be someone that he's not intimately familiar with.
I guess just honestly, just not Spock and Uhura. Like have it be like La'an and Mbenga and Una.
Sure.
With Kirk.
Can't be Chapel.
And Sam.
Sure.
Especially Sam, because we you know, he never talks to Sam in the original series.
Yeah. Well, he talks to his corpse.
No, he talks at his corpse. That's different. Sam can't hear him.
Ryan doing an accurate impression of William Shatner with a mustache in that episode.
I've looked at the picture of him flipped over, and I'm like, man, that guy looks strikingly a lot like the guy playing Sam Kirk, and also Paul Wesley if he had a mustache.
There you go.
I really want a Sam Kirk and Jim Kirk episode. Like, I know that I have said multiple times that I do not want to see Kirk on this show often, but I really want a Kirk brother episode.
I think it makes sense.
What about a short track?
If they still did short tracks, hell yeah.
Oh, they don't do them anymore?
No. They kind of, that was like a one-off experience.
Rip.
2 seasons and we're done.
Gotcha.
No, I agree with you. I would be down for a Kirk Brothers adventure.
Yeah.
Honestly, them and Carol Kane, and call it a day.
Yeah, right. That'd be wild. All right, that'll do it. So that's at the episode. That was Subspace Rhapsody. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Hope you guys liked the episode. Let us know what you think about it in the comments below if you want to. So that'll do it, guys. This was Fake Nerds Watch. We are filming this during the strikes, but if you're watching this, the strikes are over. So be sure to check out our website where you can check out all of the shows that were affected by the strikes and catch up if you'd like. There's plenty of things coming out that we've had in the pipeline for this whole time. What's it like?
We got show reviews. We got real scores. I don't know. All this stuff is out, but you know what? There's been plenty of Basement Arcades and Fake Nerd Book Club, so I hope you've been keeping up on those.
What's it like in 2025?
Who knows? Honestly, like 2026 is going to be a hell of a year.
The hottest year on record.
All right, so guys, make sure to check out our website.
Come out.
Dune 2 will finally.
You just broke my heart again.
I'm so sorry.
By the time you're watching this, I would have seen it probably.
God, I hope so.
Right. All right, guys. So make sure to check out our website at fictionpodcast.com, which is linked below for all keep up on all the shows. As Sparkz said, there's been plenty of shows that have come out at the time that this is the last time you saw this show, which is Basement Arcade and Fake Nerd Book Club. A lot of cool stuff there. So please just check those out. Make sure to support us financially if you'd like to, which is on our TeePublic and our Patreon, which you can find linked below. You can also check out all sorts of things like our social medias where we do everything, which is Fake Nerd Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. There's various social medias for the other shows that you can find through there. fakenerdguys@gmail.com. I'm a BT McClure, and check out on Twitter. I also write for AtomicGeekdom.com and KaijuRamenMagazine.com, and I probably still write for CBR.com. We'll see. And Sparkz Witty?
You can find me cursing the very name of the people who run comic book resources at Sparkz Witty on Instagram, Twitter, SPARKZ Witty. That's real. You really can see me do it there. Ryan?
Hey, man, you can find me just like reading X-Men comics and it's like loving life, living the Vida Loca at DJ Tony Snark.
Living in the sun life, living in the bun life.
Living in the sun life, living in the hot life. And TJ Tony Stark.
All right, guys. Until next time we see us,
You
live
gotta
long.
Get rid of that 616, man. No!
Live long and prosper.